Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessie Ransom, and I'm the Teaching and Learning Product Specialist. Um, Another word for that might be Leganto Product Specialist. I work with many of the libraries who are using Leganto, and that's actually what triggered the session today is some of the conversations that I've been having recently with a handful of you or your peers about situations where for one reason or another you haven't fully integrated Leganto into your course reserves services. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Um, the session is called Migrating Your Course Reserve Services to Leganto. I do want to address sort of briefly the word migrate because we're definitely not talking about a data migration here. Your course reserves reading lists in Alma just become Leganto reading lists. So definitely not an issue of migrating any data. Instead, we'll be talking about a shift in your workflows and in your library messaging, the way that you communicate with your instructors and your students about course materials, making that shift to really leverage Leganto. So today I'll cover both why you should switch your course reserve services to Leganto and also how to do it. I may get a little bit soapboxy, I'll warn you. Those of you who know me know that I am a Leganto super fan, so I feel very strongly that this is the right move for all of you to make sure that you're really getting the most value out of Leganto. So we really want to help you get there. As we said, we'll be recording the session. We'll also share the slides. So as I go, don't feel like you need to be furiously jotting these things down. We'll post both the slides and the recording on the Knowledge Center. I'll also save time for Q&A at the end, but I'm always happy to take questions throughout, and we have Kevin here to help me monitor the chat to make sure that your questions get answered. And this is the first thing that I want to address actually is, do I need to be in this session? Because this is a little bit unique, I think, what this session is probably doesn't apply to, everyone. So before you listen to, the next 50 minutes of content, I just wanted to start with kind of an overview of, who is the right audience for this session. And here I'll be really targeting libraries that are using Leganto or are planning to use Leganto in the near future that are still managing course reserves in Alma and in a way that is separate from Leganto. So that is something that we'll be kind of diving into more, but I'm thinking of things like you have a form on your library website. Instructors fill out the form to let you know what they want to use. Course reserve staff creates those reading lists in Alma. Students find those reading lists through Discovery. So managing course reserves in a way that's separate from Leganto, using library staff that are not working with Leganto, the same workflows that you may have had before you had Leganto. This is really sort of what I'm talking about here. Libraries that are still having students access their course reserves items through Discovery. If you're answering yes to these questions, you're definitely in the right place. So I have, as I said, spoken to a handful of libraries who are in the same position as you. And the reality here is that you're really not getting the best use out of Leganto, and you're also not providing the best service to your instructors and students because you have this great tool that you could be using instead of sort of your pre-Leganto processes. So first I want to talk a little bit about why we should use Leganto instead. I don't think that this will be a surprise to you. I intend this to be primarily a reminder of why you selected Leganto in the first place, and also a reminder of the advantages that Leganto provides over kind of traditional course reserve services. Of course, the first thing is that it's a better instructor experience. When you are not leveraging Leganto for this, instructors need to leave their workflows in the learning management system to go to the library website as a starting point to interact with the library. This is a challenge for them. It's an extra step. They may not remember to do this step, which means they're not remembering to work with the library. I'll say also many instructors may not know that they even can work with the library around their course materials or that they should be working with the library. if your traditional course reserve services are kind of as I described, that the instructor fills out a form on your library website, this is actually a lot of work for instructors. It's a lot of data entry that's really unnecessary once you have Leganto. And also they don't usually tell you about everything that they're using. They may tell you about the physical books that your library owns that you can move to the course reserve stacks. Because all of your electronic resources, they can just add links in the learning management system. So, there's an opportunity there where maybe your library could have purchased something to support the course, but because the instructor didn't tell you that they were using it, then there's a gap in the service there. So that's really thinking about this from the instructor perspective. Just a quick screenshot here of Leganto, which of course is integrated into the learning management system, embeds your library resources and the course materials workflows directly into that instructor experience. It's not an extra step for them to go to the library website or to email you. They don't need to fill out forms. They can use the integrated library search or the Cite It to pull resources in. They can include all different types of resources, so your library has a full picture of what is being used, and also, as I said before, the option to maybe purchase something that the instructor didn't realize they could have asked you for. So definitely a better instructor experience. Also a better student experience, and this I think is really critical as well. Many students don't actually realize that they should be going to the library website to search for course materials. Instructors may not tell them. Students probably don't come in knowing that this is an option. If they do know it's an option, they may not actually know how to do that, how to search for their course materials. Your discovery won't ever include all of the course materials because it's only the resources that are managed in Alma. So, maybe books, ebooks, potentially videos, but definitely not articles and uploaded files and things like that. And then, of course, also students encounter broken links when instructors are not working with the library. Whereas with Leganto, those links update automatically because of the integration with Alma. So definitely a better student experience, makes it much easier for students to access all of their course materials from a single place, a system that they're using every single day. They're not relying on their instructors to, tell them what's available through the library, or knowing that they need to check, some resources are in the LMS and some are in the library. And as I said before, that integration with the library means that you always have the direct linking. So better for your students, better for you at the library as well. Leganto, makes it easier for instructors and students to work with the library, which also helps you build stronger relationships, especially with instructors, and then builds out the ability to reach more instructors. When they have to leave their workflows, they have to already kind of know about the value of working with the library and put in that extra effort. Leganto also maximizes the usage of your library collection because it embeds those resources, that library search directly into the course, but also because the Leganto lists include articles and other e-resources or other library materials that instructors may not be telling you about at all. I think everybody knows the example of the instructor downloading a file from your database, uploading it into the learning management system, and you have no usage, or you have one usage for that resource. So better for tracking or for actually using your collection, and then also for those processing workflows. And this is something we'll look at in more detail, quite a lot of detail today, actually. Well, some more detail today is these processing workflows. But I think the important thing to remember here is that if you are doing sort of traditional course reserve services, you're doing the work anyway. Your library is still doing work to provide access to course materials. You're just not getting all of the added advantages of using Leganto for that. Things like the automated searching of the library collection, the data entry piece of getting the data entered into Alma. So you can really streamline that work for your library staff. And then, of course, the last piece is the analytics that you get with Leganto, the ability to really understand how your collection is used in courses, how much usage it's getting, which resources have high engagement, which departments have high engagement, and all of that very relevant information. So just quick examples here. of the workflows, embedding those Leganto workflows directly into your Alma task lists, automatically adding all the information into Alma about what's being used in courses, how it's being used. You can see things like the tags and the notes and so on, the integration with your collection. So of course, that's a great value of Leganto. And then, just an example here of the analytics that you would get when you have all different resources in Leganto as opposed to only some of them. So you can see the usage of articles for specific courses. And the last one, I realize I told you I was going to be on my soapbox here, but I did want to start with this piece. I realize that many of you are not probably surprised by anything that I'm saying here, but also on the end, better for the institution as a whole. Leganto, helps streamline access for students, which provides a better learning experience for them, takes away some of the roadblocks that they may encounter in accessing their course materials. Lets you leverage the library collection so that students don't have to pay for resources that they shouldn't have to pay for. Lets the institution leverage the investment that you've already made or that they've already made into those library resources. And then also, depending on how you use Leganto, it can help aid in copyright compliance. I'll say even if your library does absolutely nothing to track copyright, monitor copyright, police copyright, you still now have the ability to track what is being used in courses, which is still very helpful from a copyright compliance perspective. So again, hopefully I haven't told you anything that you didn't already know, but I think it's a good reminder of why you are using Leganto and how Leganto, leveraging Leganto for everything that it can do is worthwhile. So if you are, still following your traditional course reserves workflows, you're definitely not taking full advantage of this amazing tool that you have available to you. So now that you are all completely sold on what is to come, this is actually what we'll spend the bulk of the session on today, is how do you actually get to that point where you're sort of migrated, if you will, over to Leganto, rather than what you maybe were doing before Leganto. So at a very high level, this is what you need to do. You need to get the information from instructors about what they're using in their courses. I will actually talk about two different sort of paths to migration. One where instructors just kind of switch over to Leganto one day, and the next where you have kind of a transition to that point where you sort of keep some of your existing processes from the instructor perspective temporarily. So I'll talk about both options. We'll also, then the next thing that needs to happen is that the library processes those reading lists. And depending on what you pick for the first one, it may be using your kind of standard course reserves workflows or shifting to the Leganto workflows, depending on how the lists are coming in. So we'll talk about this as well. The kind of biggest step to this is making sure that the course code matches the course code in the learning management system. The course code in Alma matches the course code in the learning management system. I guess maybe that's not the biggest step, but I think it's the only real technical step here. So we'll spend some time on that as well and some different options for that. You'll need to publish the reading list, the sort of course reserves reading list, add the link to the learning management systems, and then tell students how to find their resources. So these are really the steps, and we will go through all of these steps in the session today, and I'll make some suggestions for, or sort of let you know what you would need to do and make some suggestions for the best ways to do that. So I have a lot of divider slides in this presentation. I got kind of excited about divider slides. So really, how do we get there? So the first thing that you'll need to think about is how you want to handle that instructor workflow. Migrating, if you will, again, the work that instructors do to let you know about what they're using in their courses. So as I said before, I think there's two main ways that you can think about this. I don't have a best practices for this. I really think it's up to you. It depends on your relationships with instructors, maybe how much time you might have to make a shift. I do have, though, temporarily, I definitely think you should set a point where you're not going to do this anymore, because as we said, this really isn't the best workflow from the instructor perspective. But the idea here is that you would keep the form that you have on your website. During this session, I will refer to this form. I realize you may have something else. I know that not everybody has a form on their library website that they use to get course materials, but you know, you may have an email, you may have instructors kind of stop by your office, drop a piece of paper off on your desk. When I say form, I'm really referring to whatever process you use today or that you used before Leganto to get that information from instructors. So you would keep that sort of that instructor facing as it is. And then the library would use the results of that form to create the course reserves in Alma or Leganto, and then publish the list. And then the last step would change here. So, you know, the library would, you know, when you tell the instructor that you're done with their course reserves, you would also direct them to add a link in the learning management system. Or if you have permission, you could add a link to the learning management system to finalize that process. So in this case, what's actually changing is the really the student experience is the piece that's changing here. So students would, you know, get their, most of your work stays the same, and then students get what they need from, Kevin, there's somebody who's not on mute. Can you mute somebody? I don't think I have permission to do it.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out.
Okay.
Everybody's muted according to what I can see.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
I'll keep handling it. Thanks.
Fluke. Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. So the only thing that's really changing here is the student side, the way that students access their course materials. So I have a couple tips if this is the way that you plan to take this, if this is the approach that you plan to take. So when you're telling instructors, you know, that their list is ready, this is a great opportunity to also tell them a little bit about Leganto. You know, now that you have your list, you can access it right from your course. You can add additional resources. If you use any, you know, files or articles, you can add those. In the future, you can build your own lists. You can also point out a couple of new features, things that instructors can now see that they couldn't see with your kind of traditional course reserves information. Analytics is a great example of that. If you have, you know, course reserves, instructors really can't see that data unless they ask you or you share it with them. And my tip here is also, as I said before, to think about how long you're going to sustain this, because again, it's not the best from the workflow perspective. It's not the best experience for instructors or for the library, but it can be a really great transition. I realize there may be some people who are very early in the Leganto implementation. So, you know, if you are feeling like you don't have time to, you know, totally change everything, this can be a great transition for your first semester, or, you know, while you're kind of working on other things. But then the next step, or the next option, I have this as both option.
Can I jump right in?
Yes, please.
A question came in.
Oh, good.
Does Leganto now support course level student registration? In other words, students can only see reading lists for courses they are registered.
Yes, Leganto does support that. And there's two main ways that we do that. The most common way is through the learning management system. So the student starts in the course in the learning management system, and then, you know, we know that they are authorized as a student of the course and share the list with them. That's the most common way. There is also the option to load enrollment information into Leganto. I think it's a job called the enrollment load. So that's another option as well. But yeah, we definitely do support that. That's another benefit, I should say, over Discovery. You can't do that with Discovery, but you can do that with Leganto. Great, thank you. Yes, thanks for asking questions. I don't know if I said this, but ask them as we go. I think it's always great to get your questions answered while you have it, as opposed to 30 minutes later. So, okay. So the other option, or maybe the next step, is that you move your instructor workflows to Leganto. And this is really, you know, just starting to use Leganto, But whatever kind of format you have already for communicating with instructors, if they're used to going to that exact page on your library website, if they're used to getting a reminder email from you, 2 weeks before the term starts, you can transition that messaging to instructions about Leganto. And here you would definitely want to start with why this is a better experience for them, why it's a better experience for students. Another great option here is to roll over your existing lists to Leganto so that your instructors can start with what they had last year. We will talk about this later in the session, but also offer to help with this. It's still less work for you in the end if you're today, building out the kind of the data entry piece of working with course reserves. You can instead use that time to help instructors do that data entry piece. And then, of course, long term, then they're familiar with how to do this on their own, and you won't need that help from you in the future. So these are really the first decision that you need to make is, where do you want to start? Do you want to do this kind of rip the Band-Aid off approach and go all in with Leganto, or do you want to have kind of a transition and then move to this second step? So you'll need to decide that. The second thing that you'll need to decide is how you want to handle the course codes. I mentioned that technically speaking, this is the biggest challenge, at least the biggest challenge as I see it. So I will spend some time on some of the different options that are available here. The first option is actually to do a rollover. So what you would do here is identify the courses that you have, your sort of traditional course reserve courses or reading lists that you have. And then you'd need to understand how to map the course code that you use in Alma pre-Leganto or outside of Leganto to the course code that you use for the learning management system. I'm going to flip back and forth here. Oh, this is much blurrier, more blurry than I expected it to be. I'm sorry. I just wanted this as an example. So usually when you're not using Leganto, the course code that you have in Alma is something like this, Psych 310, English 110, whatever it may be. And then the course code that the learning management system uses is something more like this. This is really just an example. I made this up, but Psych 310, Section 1, year 2002, starts in the fall. Whatever it may be, there's usually a much longer structure. So you need to understand that. You should know this as part of the Leganto implementation and the integration with the learning management system, what those course codes look like. But you'll need to see if sort of what you have been doing, how that corresponds to what the learning management system has. You may also need to incorporate information about the instructor, depending on how you do course reserves today. If you have different course reserves for different instructors teaching the same course, different sections of the same course, you may need to also look at the instructor data. And you may also have a situation where you're rolling over a single pre-Leganto list to multiple courses for Leganto. And this is if your English 110 previously was just one list with 15 different instructors associated with it. You may choose to roll that over into 15 different lists for Leganto. And actually, let me skip forward again here. This is actually what's happening here. So we have this Psych 310. We had one reading list for this pre-Leganto. We rolled it over into 3 different sections. So now there are 3 reading lists for each of the different sections based on what we previously had for that one. Down here below, there's a one-to-one relationship instead. So you can kind of see some of these different options. This is actually a portion of the rollover file. I just hid most of the columns. Everything from this A to AC is to do with primarily with the course that you're loading in. So this is the part that's really relevant from a rollover perspective. So I just wanted to have some sort of example as I was kind of talking about different ways that you could do this. This may be, this mapping of information may be something that you can do programmatically. It may be something where you need to actually, export the data and kind of take a look if you need to, really look at the instructors. The good news is it's something you'll only have to do once. This kind of rolling over your very your pre-Leganto course codes into Leganto course codes. Once they're in kind of your LMS format, they'll be consistent moving forward. So you won't have to do this sort of what did we used to type in when we typed it in manually? You won't have to do that more than once. Should be just the first time that you would need to do that. This option here, rolling over the reading lists, is the best option. So I would recommend starting here to see if this is even something that's possible. I know not everybody does the rollover, has the course loader integration profile set up. I understand that it may not be the right fit for everybody, but I would recommend starting here. I just want to skip ahead and see, yes. Because also this is something that really aligns well with the instructor workflow. So if your plan is that instructors will, just start working in Leganto, this is a great way to do that. They will come in from the learning management system and they'll simply see the resources that they used last year. It may be the 2 books that you put on reserves last year, but from there, they can modify the list as they need to. They can submit it to the library. They can add all the other types of resources that they can do with Leganto. But it's a really great starting point from the instructor perspective because they can kind of see where they're going here. It's easier to start with a list with 2 items on it than to start from scratch. It kind of gets to that next step. So this is a really great option if you can do it. Even if you're not planning to do that, this is still a nice option because you have those rolled over versions of your old course reserves that you can start with. And then as you are processing the data that comes in on that form, you just need to find the right course code in Alma. So then from there, you would be able to build the list or edit the list depending on what makes sense for you. So this is my first choice. But again, as I said, I realize it won't work for everybody. The next 2 options that I'm going to talk about are really only relevant if you plan to keep your existing form. If your plan is to just have all instructors start working in Leganto, then you don't really have to worry. They would essentially start with a blank list and build it out, and the link would be associated with the course code because the learning management system creates that association for you. So these next 2 options are really only if you plan to keep your instructor processes as they have been for a certain amount of time. So the next one is that you would run the course loader, load all of your new course information into Alma, and then as instructors submit their list, you'd need to look at your form to make sure that it has all of the information that you need to connect that reading list that you're going to build to the right course code in Alma. So, you may not need the full course code that the instructor or that the learning management system used, but maybe you realize you need the section or you need the course code in the section or whatever pieces make it unique. You'd also have the instructor name, so that would help you identify it. If this is the process that you take, I have a little tip here, which is that there's actually fewer steps involved if you build the list in Leganto versus Alma. There's fewer clicks and there's a little bit less data entry. So if you are building, new lists from scratch and using this approach, this is a good opportunity to kind of switch some of those workflows to Leganto because it's a little bit easier. You start with a blank list and then Leganto includes a prompt to link it to the course. So that's just a small tip, but I wanted to add it in anyway. And then the last piece, assuming that you don't use the course loader at all, you don't have the IT support to get that course loader running. The last piece is really just to get the information from the instructors that you would need to create the course code or to add the course code to the data that you already have. So for this, you'd still need to understand how the course codes are structured in the learning management system. I have a sample down here from our same course loader example, but if we assume that this is the course code for the first part, the course section for the second part, then your form would just need to ask for that information so that you can make sure that you have the course code on the course in Alma. Once you know the structure, it is something you can create manually. If this last piece is to do with the term, then that would be consistent across your courses. If you have something else, maybe you have multiple terms, then that would need to be a question that you would ask. Same thing, you should only have to do this once as part of the initial move over to switch this to Leganto, but sorry, there was one thing I wanted to say here. Oh, also as part of this, you can do this while you're kind of processing the course reserves. You're already in there, sort of touching every reading list anyway. So from here, you can either trade out the course code for this new learning management system code, or you can create a new course and then update or create a new course with the right course code. All right, I talked myself in circles a little bit there, but I don't see anything new popping up in the chat. Kevin, did I miss anything?
Nope, I haven't seen anything either.
Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. This piece is important, which is why I'm spending some time on it, because this is what builds out that connection with the learning management system. And that's the piece that, so significantly improves the student experience and, moving forward, the instructor experience as well. So this is an important piece is getting these old Alma courses to link up to the learning management system. So again, you can look at the different options and see what works for you. But then the next piece that would happen is that the library would process the reading list. So you get the information from instructors, you understand how it's going to connect to the learning management system, and then you're going to process the reading lists. In general, this would be in either the same way that you did before Leganto or in the same way that you do for lists submitted through Leganto. So you probably already have these processes in place. It's just kind of a matter of figuring out, what needs to happen here. Before we dig into that, I do want to give you a quick piece of information that may not be relevant for any of you, but I want to talk about it anyway. I said before that course reserves lists will simply become Leganto reading lists, but there is one sort of strange caveat to that. If your Leganto was activated before November of 2020, and you have reading lists that were created before November of 2020, when you view those lists in Leganto, they have this as the section name. This is sort of the default section name as of a couple of years ago. We changed this. So now when Alma reading lists are created in Alma and then viewed in Leganto, they have resources as the default section name. Just very generic, not something that would necessarily need to be cleaned up. If you're not sure where you are, or if whether it was November or October or whatever, you can use an analytics report. You can use analytics to pull a list of all of the section names. That's actually what I did here to find this one, because we don't have very many examples of this. So I did an analytics report to pull the section name. I filtered to exactly this section name NA. This is what it will say. So you can filter to that to just see if we had any. And if you do find that you fall into this situation, like I said, it should be pretty rare, but it may apply. So if you do find that you have reading lists, your Alma reading lists have that generic section name, open a support ticket, and we can try to find a way to help you update them in bulk. I also want to say this is a one-time process, so you will not need to do this moving forward. Moving forward, all lists will have this resources as the section name. If you check and you don't have them now, you don't have to worry that a year from now you're going to have them, but it is something to consider or to look into, because I think this is just, it's fine, but it's not a great user experience, so it'd be worth cleaning it up. So again, probably doesn't apply to most of you, may not apply to any of you, but I did want to mention it anyway. So that's a one-time thing, is just checking the section name to see if this even matters to you at all. But then the next step here is that you would just process the reading lists. So if you are using your course reserves form, you would process them in the same way that you did previously. So if you get that form and you use that to build out the reading list, then that's what you would still do. If you do have course reserve staff who aren't using Leganto, this is a great opportunity to train them on how Leganto works and what you can do with it. It may be that it's easier to build lists in Leganto versus Alma, depending on what's on the list, what they need to do. So it's definitely worth making sure that your course reserve staff know how to use Leganto and how to toggle back and forth between Alma and Leganto. This is really a great feature as well. And then if instead you have decided that your instructors are just going to go to Leganto, then you would process the reading list using your new Leganto workflows. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but hopefully you know that or you're figuring that out. But basically, this is the step. You would just process them in the way that you do, either as course reserves or as Leganto. And this is also, more of a transition, especially this first one. It's of course more efficient for the library to leverage Leganto. So, as you start to make that transition, your instructors are building out these reading lists directly in Alma for you. So this is, if you are doing this first one, again, this is a temporary thing, and eventually you'd be leveraging Leganto for that work of processing or getting the data entry in there, I should say. The other thing that needs to happen is that the reading lists need to be published. So you can do this individually on the reading list as you are doing that processing work. So if you're in, every single reading list, doing the things that you do for that reading list, you can just publish it as your last step. You can also publish reading lists in bulk. The reading list bulk update job can publish them. So that's another option as well. And then the last thing that needs to happen is that you need to add the link in the learning management system. And this also depends kind of on your institution and on how things work at your institution. I know some libraries do have permission to work in the courses and can go in and add the links for instructors. Maybe your library has the Leganto link turned on by default for all courses, and this isn't even an issue. Maybe you work with instructional designers and you let them know, or you let the instructor know that their list is done and then give them the instructions for how to add the link. So one way or another, you need to make sure that there is a link from the course in the learning management system, whether you tell the instructor how to do it, tell somebody else that it's ready, have library staff do it. That would really be kind of the last step here. And then also this is a great opportunity to let instructors know again why you've made this change, why this is better for their students, what else they're able to do with Leganto, that they can do this work on their own in the future, that it's easier than what you had today. So you can also use this sort of process of your list is done, add this link as a quick opportunity to share. I would say just a few quick tips and maybe the option to contact you or to go to your website for more information. But because this is different for them, it's a great chance to point out why and to point out the benefits here. So now the lists are processed, they're published, they're linked. And then the last step here is just that your students need to know how to access these resources. This is the easiest part. And the step here is really just to update your student-facing resources. I chose the word resources because it's both like your website and also the people who work at the library and work with students. And instructors, actually, I don't have that on here, but as part of that process of working with instructors, you would also let them know that this is where students will be able to access their resources. So what you need to do is look at any kind of student-facing materials that you have on your website to make sure that they point students to the learning management system rather than the library discovery. And then also that anybody who might work with students and be asked this question about how to find my course materials, that all of your people working in the library also know how to help students find course materials through the learning management system. This really, once you have Leganto, this is really, truly 100% the best way to point students to their resources. First of all, it's much more intuitive for students. They don't need to leave their workflows to come to the library website and do this search. So it's much more intuitive for students. It also makes it very hard for them to find the wrong resources. I know, in Discovery, they have to know their course code or their course instructor or the course name, and they don't always have it exactly right. Whereas Leganto just points them to exactly the right list for the course that they're enrolled in. Also, Discovery, Primo, or Summon won't ever be complete. It won't ever include all of the resources that they need for their course. It only includes the resources that are part of the ALMA repository. So it won't include websites or articles or uploaded files or all of the many other things that might be required for the student to to engage with as part of the course. And that's actually why I have this last kind of sub bullet here, which is that library staff, if students are coming to you, asking for how to do this, the best answer is, go to this link in your learning management system. But if they're looking for like a specific resource or something like that, you can use the find lists page to search for the reading list and to show the students, the reading list for their course, because this is what will include everything that's part of the list. And this is also, of course, the interface that's going to be familiar to students as they start to do this on their own. So, this is really a huge value of Leganto, is just making this process easier for students. I'll say this also may be a good opportunity as you are working with students to encourage them to ask other instructors to use Leganto, because it is really so easy for the students, such a great way for them to get to all of their course materials. So that's the student side of it. And actually that's the end as well. So we've made it. I hope I haven't complicated this or overcomplicated this. It's really not a difficult process, but I know that it's a shift for you in terms of the way that you work with instructors, the way that you work internally. So, just as a quick reminder, we did cover all of the things that are on this list here. You need to get the information from the instructors. You need to process the reading lists. You need to make sure that the course code matches the learning management system, publish the list, add the link to the learning management system, and then tell students where to go to access their materials. As you now know, some of these steps will take a little bit more planning than others, but in general, it shouldn't be too scary. It's definitely well worth the effort. Any effort that you might put into this, as I said in the beginning, it's a better experience for your end users. It's a better experience for the library, and it also lets you, leverage this very powerful tool that you have. You already have Leganto, so at this point, you should be moving your kind of older services into this new tool. So that's just a quick reminder of all the things that we talked about and the steps that would need to be involved. We have been recording this session, and this is where it will be. This is on the best practices section of Leganto. Best practices and how-tos. There's a section called Getting Started with Leganto. So this is where I'll put the slides and the recording, so that, if you're not planning to do this yet, but you're planning to do it, in a month or whatever, you can get to all of this. So that's where we will post it. And then with that, we do have quite a bit of time left for questions. There's a question here that I don't think I understand, about giving access to a person. So I don't know if that's for the recording. When we post the recording, it's not behind a password or anything like that. So Kevin just shared the link to the page that we'll post it on. Once the recording's available, which might be, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. So once it's up there, it won't be behind a password. You won't need to register or anything. Same with the slides. You'll be able to just download them right from the website. All right, great. I did interpret it correctly. Perfect. Other questions? Are there maybe concerns that I haven't addressed as part of this? Anything that I've missed? Let's see. Do you have a guide or tips about how to make the course reserves request process easier on the instructor side in Leganto, indicating loan periods, etc.? I don't think we have a guide necessarily, because this is, I'm going to stop sharing. You know what, I'm going to stop sharing the presentation in a minute, but before I do that, I'll put this slide up here just for a minute. It has my email address, so feel free to contact me if you have any questions that I didn't get to today, or if your question was sort of too long to have to type into the chat on the WebEx. I'll just keep it up here for just a minute. The way that libraries do this does vary from one library to another in terms of things like indicating loan periods. There are a couple of different options for how you can do that. I hope I left this up here long enough. I'm going to go now and share actually my Leganto, and we'll see if I have this set up. I'm not sure if I do or not, but one of the main ways that I see libraries handling, especially loan periods, is through the questions feature. Um, we're sort of off the topic now, but I hope it's okay with everybody that I'll show this. So I'm going to just navigate over here to my Leganto list, and I'm logged in right now as an instructor. And I know I turned this question off yesterday, so I'm hoping I remembered to turn it back on. But you can set it up so that when instructors add certain types of resources to their list, such as physical items, a question will pop up and we'll see. Yes, good. Okay. So you can specify, you can customize all the details about how this works. So our question on our demo site here pops up when the instructor adds an item that's available physically and not available electronically. And you can even be more specific. You could say, only for books and videos, or whatever that may not be relevant. But you can customize the situation that the question pops up, and you can customize what it says, what the question is, and then what the different answers are. So, if you have different loan periods or, other information that you need to get from the instructors in certain circumstances, this is what I see as the most common way that libraries get that. You want to think pretty critically about, when you really do need this information. You don't want this to pop up, for every one of the 100 items that the instructor adds. But if you do absolutely need this critical information for, physical items, then you can ask it here. So you would customize what the responses are. And then when they select this answer, you'll be able to see that on the Alma side. So it'll add a tag to the resource, and it will also add a note that says the question that was asked and then the answer that was given. So then you're able to either filter by the tag or just look at the note and understand what their request is. So this is my kind of top recommendation. The question was, do you have any tips about how to make the course reserve request process easier on the instructor side, loan periods, etc.? This is my tip. You can see here we have some other options as well. If you let instructors indicate purchases, I've seen where maybe it's only for books that the library doesn't have. There's a question now about how to do this. So I will look for the documentation. And you know what, I'll look for it right now because it's called Leganto questions. Configuring Leganto questions, I'm pretty sure is, yes, there we go. So I'll put this link in the chat. And for everybody. Okay, so we do have a new question, which is the best version of learning management system to link to Leganto? We work with all of the different learning management systems. I'm demoing right now in Canvas, but we do work with all of them. There's documentation on the developer network. You know what, maybe I'll put this link in there too. There's documentation on the developer network for how we integrate with all the different learning management systems. Anybody that supports LTI, we can integrate with. So we have libraries using, I think there's actually a list here. Yep. So these are the ones that we have libraries that are using right now. If there's something that's not on the list here, as long as it supports LTI, Leganto can integrate with it. I hope that was the question. Here, while we wait. Okay, perfect. While we wait, I'll put this back up just in case you were still trying to write that down. I can hang out if you do have more questions, but they're sort of coming in slow. I'll talk for a while in case somebody is chatting.
Jesse, this is
Yeah.
Kevin. I just realized a couple people sent questions just
Oh,
to me, and,
okay,
and
great.
I was just thinking, oh, you must be seeing this, but
Why
you're
is
not.
Jesse skipping this?
So,
Okay.
folks, if you do have questions, just so Jesse can see them too, you send them to both host and presenter. But one of them, Manuela, said, can you talk about the difference between rollover and course loader?
Oh, yes, I would love to. Um, it's actually in some ways the same. So we can it uses the same functionality of Alma. I'll say that. So we use the course loader integration profile to do both. And the course loader, you know what? Since I already have some of this up, this is called configuring course loading. Now you all know that I've memorized some of our documentation for Leganto. Um, but essentially what you do with the course loader is you load a file into Alma that has all of your course information. This table here talks about what that course information is, but the course code, the course title, lots of optional information here, start dates, end dates, number of students, the years, the instructors. So you load all of that information into Alma, and then you have course records for all of the courses that are being taught at the institution. The rollover process, that's all it does, by the way, is it just loads these Alma course records into Alma. The rollover process uses the same job. So the file has some additional columns at the end. I think these are the two that I showed in that screenshot, the operation and the old course code. So you can say what I want to do with this course load is actually roll over these courses. And so you would say the old course is, in my example, it was like English 310 or something like that. My English 310 course, I want to take the reading list that's associated with that course and I want to roll it over into this course up here, the one that we've just added all of that course information for. It creates a copy of the reading list. There's a number of other things that you can do as part of creating that copy. You can, down here below, you can say things like, I want to copy the tags. I want to copy the collaborators. I want to copy, I don't know, the syllabus. So you can specify, it's not just a direct copy of the reading list. You can kind of control how it's copied, but it essentially creates a second version of the reading list or a new version of the reading list that's associated with the new course. So I talked about it from the perspective of you have your old Alma course reserves reading lists and you roll them over into Leganto reading lists. The only real reason to do that is to update the course codes in bulk. That's the purpose of this job. But also, moving forward, when you're in your second year with Leganto, you would roll over potentially last year's reading lists into this year's reading lists. This is actually, if you are not following me at all, this is one of the topics that was part of the best practices training that we just ran. And I will pull up the link for this. Not best practices, sorry, become an expert training. It's in the training and webinars, and I'll post this link in the chat as well. This series here includes some of these sort of more complex topics. Bulk rollover is one of the more complex topics. So there's some slides and a training that's specifically about the rollover if you're not familiar with it and wondering how it works. This goes into quite a bit more detail, but at a high level, that's the difference between the two.
And Jesse, Heather asked a question. Not all instructors use the LMS. Can their students access those instructors' Leganto reading lists some other way? I
Yes.
assume they can access via Discovery, but would they be able to include non-library resources, such as website links in that case?
So in this case, what you do is expose the Leganto login screen. If you're not sure what the URL is for your Leganto login screen, put in a support ticket and we can help you. But this is another way to get into Leganto. I'll log in as a student here. So every Leganto also comes with a direct login screen. And this is now what we're looking at actually is lists that I have specifically saved to my lists page. If I was coming to this for the very first time, I would probably see this find lists. So here I can search for the reading list. You can search, this is actually customizable, what all the different search options are, but I can search by the title, I can search by the course code, the course instructors, the year, any combination of these things, and find lists that way. And these lists are full Leganto reading lists. It's, they look the same as they do in the learning management system. It's all of the resources. This is not a great example. Oh, here's a website. So all of the resources that would be, part of this list, but this would be the better place to start rather than Primo or Summon, again, because it has everything. You may choose to, I also have a demo Primo here. What you may choose to do is add Leganto as one of the options up here from your library website to just create a link to Leganto.
And Jesse Midori has a couple of questions. I think you can see these, but it's basically about Moodle.
Yeah, so we work with all different versions of Moodle. That's the question, is which version of Moodle. We work with all the different versions of Moodle. It's just an LTI integration, which is a very standard integration with learning management systems. I don't have an example because I have to start my Moodle server, so it takes a little bit longer for me to get there. But I can send over some screenshots. If you want to send me an email, let me just put this back up here. Feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to send you some screenshots of what it looks like in Moodle. It's very similar to what I showed in Canvas. All of the different integrations, all of the different learning management system integrations are very similar. Essentially, you click on a link in the learning management system and it opens the Leganto list, either embedded in the page or in a new tab. So that is not a great answer, maybe not the answer you're looking for, but we do work with all of them, and it's a very simple integration. It's actually very common for learning management systems to integrate in this way with other tools. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So I will say thank you to all of you for joining today. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to reach out if you are kind of taking on this process. I'm happy to talk about any of this in more details. But otherwise, I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day.